Dear learners, I am Dr. Pankaj Bora. Today we are going to discuss one very important topic. This is dark tourism, ethical concerns and educational value. In our previous class, we have discussion about in detail what dark tourism is and patterns of dark tourism, its nature and various types of dark tourism. Now we will have a repetition on that particular part. What dark tourism refers? Dark tourism refers to travel to places associated with death, suffering, violence, disaster, and human tragedy. Such sites include battlefields, genocide memorials, concentration camps, war cemeteries, prison sites, sites of terrorism, disaster zones, and locations of political repression. Although visiting places to death and tragedy is not a new phenomenon, pilgrimage to such execution of sites and pilgrimage to execution of sites and public spectacles of punishments, pilgrimage to execution sites and public spectacles of punishment extend even in medieval times. The formal academic discussion of dark tourism emerged in the late 20th century. And we had detailed discussion in our previous class regarding all these things. With globalization, improved mobility, and the influence of mass media and digital platforms, dark tourism has become a significant niche within the tourism industry. However, alongside its educational and commemorative potential, dark tourism raised profound ethical concerns. These concerns relate to the commercialization of sufferings, respect for victims, voyeurism, authenticity, representation of history, community consent, and moral responsibilities of tourists and tourism managers. First, the ethical concern we are going to discuss today is commercialization of sufferings. We can highlight it as commercialization of sufferings. One of the most prominent ethical concerns in dark tourism is the commercialization of human suffering. The tourism industry functions largely on market. Based on market principles, where destinations are promoted, packaged, and sold for profit. When sites of mass death or trauma are turned into tourist attractions, there is a risk that tragedy becomes a commodity. There's always this risk that tragedy becomes commodity. Entry-fees, guided tours, souvenir shops, and branded merchandise can transform places of mourning into spaces of consumption. This raises moral question about whether it is appropriate to generate economic profit from human pain or loss. The commercialization of suffering may dilute the gravity of historical events even and reduce complex human tragedies into marketable experiences, undermining the dignity of victims. This is one serious ethical concern. I would like to give importance on another serious ethical concern. This is respect for victims and survivors. Dark tourism sites are deeply connected to the lived experiences of victims and survivors. These places often represent profound trauma, grief, and loss for individuals, families, and entire communities. Ethical concerns arise when tourists fail to show respect and sensitivity. Inappropriate behavior, such as taking smiling selfies, making jokes, and treating sites casually, can be deeply hurtful to survivors and descendants of victims. And in recent days, these are becoming very popular, that inappropriate behavior in front of certain memories, that is, smiling selfies and making jokes, taking casually, all this deeply hurtful to survivors. Such actions reflect a lack of moral awareness and empathy. Ethical dark tourism demands that visitors recognize these spaces as sites of memory and mourning, requiring solemn behavior, reflection, and respect rather than casual entertainment. But this is becoming a problem in nowadays. This is becoming a very deep issue, bigger issue that the dark tourist sites are facing. Then voyeurism and morbid curiosity. Another major ethical issue is the motivation behind visiting dark tourism sites. While some tourists seek historical understanding and moral reflection, others may be driven by morbid curiosity, thrill seeking, or fascination with death. This is very serious. This raises concern about voyeurism, where suffering is observed from a distance without emotional encouragement or ethical responsibility. There is no relationship, no connection between suffering and ethical responsibility. They are observing from a distance without their emotional engagement to the monument or the sites. Consuming tragedy as a spectacle risks dehumanizing victims and turning their pain into a source of entertainment. When dark tourism caters to shock value rather than education, it challenges fundamental moral principles and undermines the ethical legitimacy of such travel. Another important thing here is authenticity and representation of history. Ethical concerns in dark tourism are closely tied to how history is prepared and represented here and interpreted. The narratives presented at dark tourism sites significantly influence public understanding of past events. There is a risk of oversimplification, selective storytelling, or political manipulation. Certain aspects of history may be emphasized while others are ignored depending on national, ideological, or commercial interest. This is a bigger issue. Such distortions can marginalize particular groups, silence uncomfortable truth, or create biased interpretations. Ethical dark tourism requires accurate, balanced, and inclusive representation of historical events, ensuring that the complexity of human sufferings and responsibility is acknowledged. Then, trivialization through media and social platforms. The rise of social media has intensified ethical challenges in dark tourism. Platforms that prioritize visual appeal and instant sharing encourage tourists to focus on capturing images rather than encouraging in meaningful reflection. These are bigger issues in today's world. Hashtags, reels, and photographs taken at sites of tragedy can trivialize suffering and transform memorials into mere backdrops. The digital circulation of such content risks normalizing disrespectful behavior and reducing trauma to visual consumption. Ethical concerns arise when remembrance is replaced by performance and reflection is overshadowed by desire for online validation. And this is a bigger issue, this issue regarding ethics in dark tourism. Then, impact on local communities. Dark tourism sites are often located within living communities that continue to bear the psychological and social impact of past tragedies. While tourism may bring economic benefits, yes, tourism of course brings economic benefits, but it can also reopen wounds and disrupt local life. Constant visitation may cause emotional distress for survivors and residents, particularly when their trauma is repeatedly exposed to outsiders. Moreover, communities may have little control over how their history is narrated or commercialized. Ethical dark tourism requires sensitivity to local emotions, local communities' participation in decision making, and fair distribution of benefits. Ignoring communities' perspectives risks perpetuating exploitation and injustice. Another important ethical concern is disaster tourism and ethical exploitation. Dark tourism often overlaps with disaster tourism, where visitors travel to areas affected by natural or human made catastrophes. Visiting disaster zones shortly after events can be ethically problematic, as it may exploit grief and suffering. Tourists may unintentionally intrude on recovery efforts or treat devastation as a spectacle. The ethical dilemma lies in balancing awareness raising with respect for affected populations. Without clear ethical guidance, disaster tourism risks reinforcing unequal power relations between observers and victims. This is important. Then, memorialization versus entertainment. A key ethical tension in dark tourism lies between remembrance and entertainment. Memorial sites are intended to honor victims, preserve memory, and encourage reflection. However, tourism infrastructure may introduce elements of leisure and entertainment that dilute the solemn purpose of these spaces. Dramatized narratives, sensational displays, or interactive attractions may blur the line between education and amusement. Ethical dark tourism requires careful management to ensure that memorialization remains central and entertainment does not overshadow remembrance. Then, one very important point here, that political and ideological instrumentalization. Dark tourism sites can also be used as a tool for political and ideological purposes. Governments and institutions may selectively highlight certain narratives to promote national identity, justify political actions, or reinforce collective victimhood. This instrumentalization of memory raises serious ethical concerns, as it may distort history and silence alternative perspectives. Ethical dark tourism must resist propaganda and encourage critical engagement with the past, recognizing multiple experiences and responsibilities. Another serious issue dark tourism is facing, this is visitors' responsibility and ethical awareness. Ethics in dark tourism is not solely the responsibility of institutions and tour operators. It also rests with individual visitors. Tourists must reflect on their motivations, behavior, and attitudes. Ethical visitation requires humility, respect, and a willingness to learn. Visitors should approach dark tourism sites as witness to history rather than consumers of experience. Personal moral awareness is crucial in transforming dark tourism from an exploitative practice into a meaningful encounter with the past. Dark tourism often mirrors the deep-rooted global inequalities that characterize the contemporary world. A significant proportion of dark tourism sites are located in developing or formerly colonized regions that have experienced war, genocide, political repression, poverty, and natural disasters. These sites are frequently visited by tourists from affluent nations, creating an uneven relationship between those who observe and those whose suffering is being observed. This imbalance gives rise to serious ethical concerns, as the experience of marginalized communities are often consumed as educational or emotional experiences by outsiders who remain largely detached from the lived realities of such trauma. We can identify the whole phenomena as global inequality. This ethical asymmetry between the observer and the observed is central to the critique of dark tourism. Tourists from economically and politically powerful regions often possess the privilege of mobility, safety, and choice, whereas the communities associated with dark tourism sites may still be grappling with the long-term consequences of violence. Such context, sufferings risk being transformed into an object of curiosity or learning rather than being recognized as an ongoing human condition. The pain of marginalized groups may thus be reduced to a narrative for external consumption, reinforcing existing global hierarchies rather than challenging them. Suffering of vulnerable communities. Moreover, the suffering of vulnerable communities becomes a learning experience for outsiders. Ethical questions arise regarding consent, representation, and benefit sharing. While visitors may gain knowledge, empathy, and moral insight, the communities themselves may receive limited material or social benefits. In some cases, they may even experience emotional harm as their trauma is repeatedly exposed to the public scrutiny. Their trauma is repeatedly, they have to uh, express their trauma, their grief to public scrutiny repeatedly, and this is very harmful. Ethical dark tourism must therefore move beyond passive observation and actively address these power imbalances. This requires a commitment to respect, humility, and reciprocity, ensuring that local voices are heard, community perspectives are prioritized, and benefits are shared in equitable ways. Without such ethical engagement, dark tourism risks perpetuating inequality rather than fostering understanding and justice. Regulations and ethical management regarding dark tourism. What we see, the absence of comprehensive ethical guidelines intensifies many of the concerns associated with dark tourism. There is a need for clear codes of conduct. Yes, there is a need for clear codes of conduct, interpretative standards, and regulatory framework to guide site management and visitor behavior. Heritage organizations, museums, and tourism authorities play a vital role in ensuring that dark tourism is developed responsibly. Ethical management can help balance economic sustainability with moral responsibility. Closely linked to these concerns is the issue of regulation and ethical guidelines in dark tourism. The lack of comprehensive regulatory frameworks, we already have discussed, the lack of ethical regulatory framework, comprehensive regulatory framework, significantly intensifies ethical problems associated with visiting sites of sufferings. At present, there are few global standards governing dark tourism practices, leading to wide variations in sites of management, interpretation, and visitors' behavior. In many cases, visitor codes and conducts are absent or weakly enforced, allowing disrespectful or inappropriate action to go unchecked. This regulatory vacuum can result in the commercialization, trivialization, or misrepresentation of tragic histories. And what we can say that we need a strong ethical framework. Ethical frameworks are therefore essential to guide the development and management of dark tourism sites. Such frameworks should emphasize dignity, historical accuracy, community participation, and visitors' responsibility. International organizations like UNESCO and other heritage bodies play a crucial role in setting standards, promoting best practices, and safeguarding sites of memory. Through heritage designation, monitoring, and ethical guidelines, the institutions can help ensure that dark tourism contributes to education and remembrance rather than exploitation. Effective regulation also promotes accountability among tourist stakeholders, including governments, tourist operators, and site managers. By establishing clear ethical norms and enforceable guidelines, regulation helps protect the dignity of victims, respect the sensitivities of affected communities, and encourage reflective and responsible visitors' behavior. Ultimately, ethical regulation is not about restricting access to dark tourism sites, but about ensuring that such access is guided by respect, responsibility, and moral awareness. In this way, dark tourism can move toward a more just and ethical engagement with the painful histories it seeks to remember. Dark tourism represents a complex interaction of memory, morality, and market forces. While it involves inherent ethical risks such as commercialization, voyeurism, and historical distortion, it also offers opportunities for education, remembrance, and ethical reflection. The ethical concerns surrounding dark tourism do not imply that visiting sites of suffering is inherently wrong. Rather, they highlight the importance of how such sites are represented, managed, and experienced. Ethical dark tourism demands respect for victims, sensitivity towards survivors and communities, accurate historical representation, responsible visitors' behavior. Ultimately, dark tourism should function not as a form of consumption but as a moral engagement with the past, ones that transform remembrance into reflection and memory into responsibility. The next part of this module, this is dark tourism and educational value. We already have discussed the ethical responsibilities or ethical part of dark tourism. Now we are going to discuss the educational value in dark tourism. While dark tourism often attracts criticism for ethical and moral reasons, we already have discussed in detail, it also possesses significant educational value. When approached responsibly, dark tourism serves as a powerful medium for historical learning, moral reflection, empathy building, and critical understanding of social, political, and cultural processes. Dark tourism can serves as a powerful medium for remembrance and moral education, encouraging visitors to reflect on the consequences of hatred, intolerance, and abuse of power. Now we are going to discuss the educational value of dark tourism and its role in shaping historical consciousness, ethical awareness, and global citizenship. One of the most significant educational value of dark tourism lies in its ability to teach history beyond textbook. Dark tourism sites offer tangible and immersive encounters with the past. Visiting battlefields, memorials, and sites of genocide allows learners to connect historical narratives with physical spaces, artifacts, and landscapes. Such experiential learning deepens understanding and makes history more immediate and real. For example, visiting war memorials or former concentration camps provides direct exposure to the realities of violence and oppression. This helps learner comprehend the scale and consequences of historical events in a way that written text alone cannot achieve. Dark tourism does bridge the gap between academic history and lived reality, enhancing historical awareness and retention. Another important point here is experiential learning and memory. Dark tourism promotes experiential learning, which is widely recognized as an effective educational approach. Learning through experience engages multiple senses and emotions, leading to deeper cognitive and emotional understanding. When individuals walk through memorial sites, museums, or preserved ruins, they encounter history as a lived experience rather than distant knowledge. Such experiences contribute to collective and individual memory formation. Dark tourism sites function as spaces of remembrance, where past events are preserved and transmitted to future generations. And this is why this is important here, that this helps prevent historical amnesia and ensure that traumatic past are not forgotten. Education through memory is particularly important in societies that have experienced conflict, genocide, or political violence, as it contributes to historical continuity and awareness. Another educational value here is understanding human suffering and violence. Crucial educational value of dark tourism lies in its capacity to teach about human suffering and realities of violence. Dark tourism sites expose visitors to the consequences of war, genocide, colonialism, political repression, and social injustice. By confronting these realities, visitors gain a deeper understanding of the destructive impact of hatred, intolerance, and abuse of power. And this is very much necessary. Another important point here is moral and ethical education. Dark tourism has strong potential as the tool for moral and ethical education. Sites associated with tragedy often provoke emotional responses such as grief, shock, empathy, and moral discomfort. This emotional engagement can lead to ethical reflection and self-examination. Visitors are compelled to confront questions of right and wrong. What is right and what is wrong here? What is justice and what is injustice here? Responsibility and accountability. By learning about past atrocities, visitors may reflect on moral failures and ethical responsibilities in contemporary society. Then we may move to promoting empathy and humanization of history. One of the most powerful educational outcomes of dark tourism is the development of empathy. Dark tourism sites often focus on personal stories, testimonies, and individual experiences of suffering. These narratives humanize history by shifting attention from abstract statistics to real lives. Through exposure to survivor accounts, photographs, personal belongings, and memorial inscriptions, visitors are encouraged to emotionally connect with victims. This emotional engagement fosters empathy and compassion, helping learners understand suffering from a human perspective. Empathy building is a vital educational goal as it contributes to social understanding and ethical responsibility. This is very important. Another educational value here is critical thinking and historical interpretation. Dark tourism also helps enhances critical thinking by encouraging visitors to question historical narratives and interpretations. Many dark tourism sites represent complex and contested histories. Visitors are often exposed to multiple perspectives, interpretations, and debates surrounding events such as wars, genocides, and political conflict. Engaging with these narratives promotes analytical thinking and historical inquiry. Visitors learn to question sources, recognize bias one, and understand the role of power and ideology in shaping history. This is very important. This critical engagement transforms passive learning into active intellectual inquiry. This is one of the most important points here. Another point here, peace education and conflict awareness. Dark tourism plays a significant role in peace education. Sites of war, genocide, and political violence serves as reminders of devastating consequences of conflict. By learning about past violence, visitors gain insights into the importance of peace. What is peace? What is reconciliation and conflict resolution? They can learn these basic human behaviors, basic human necessities, that peace, reconciliation, and conflict resolution. Another important point we have to discuss here is human rights education. Many dark tourism sites are directly linked to violations of human rights. Visiting former prisons, labor camps, or sites of political repression exposes visitors to the realities of state violence, sometimes authoritarianism, and injustice. Such experiences provide concrete examples of human rights abuses and gross violations of human rights and their consequences. Dark tourism thus serves as an informal educational platform for human rights education. It highlights the importance of legal protection, democratic values, and social justice. By learning about past abuses, visitors may become more aware of contemporary human rights issues and their responsibilities as citizens. Then, interdisciplinary learning. Dark tourism supports interdisciplinary education. In our previous class also we have discussed on regarding the nature of interdisciplinary nature of dark tourism. Dark tourism supports interdisciplinary education by integrating history, sociology, political science, anthropology, psychology, and cultural studies. Understanding dark tourism sites requires knowledge of social structure, political ideologies, economic conditions, and cultural context. This interdisciplinary approach enriches learning by encouraging holistic understanding. For students and scholars, dark tourism offers opportunities to explore complex interaction between society, power, memory, and culture. Such learning extends beyond disciplinary boundaries and promotes comprehensive intellectual development. Education through museums and interpretation centers play a central role in enhancing the educational value of dark tourism. Through curated exhibitions, archival materials, multimedia presentations, and guided tours, these institutions provide context and meaning to tragic events. Effective interpretation transforms dark tourism sites into educational spaces rather than mere attractions. Well-designed exhibits encourage reflection, critical thinking, and empathy. Interpretation centers also help prevent misinterpretation. Then, community-based learning and local narratives. Dark tourism also facilitates learning from local communities. Community participating in storytelling and interpretation allows visitors to understand trauma from live perspectives. Local narratives provide authenticity, and depth, enriching educational outcomes. Learning directly from communities affected by tragedy fosters mutual understanding and respect. It also helps preserve oral histories and local knowledge, contributing to inclusive and participatory education. Dark tourism can help in making global citizenship education. In an increasingly interconnected world today, dark tourism contributes to global citizenship education by exposing visitors to international histories of suffering and resilience. It promotes cross cultural understanding and shared human responsibilities. Visitors learn that tragedies are not confined to one nation or culture but are part of global human experience. This awareness fosters solidarity, responsibility, and ethical engagement at a global level. Then, limitations and conditions for educational value. While dark tourism has strong educational potential, its value depends on responsible management and ethical engagement. Without proper interpretation, dark tourism may become superficial or sensational. Education requires context, sensitivity, and critical framing. Educational value is maximized when dark tourism sites prioritize learning over entertainment, accuracy over spectacle, and empathy over curiosity. Visitors must also approach these sites with openness and respect. In conclusion, what we can say that dark tourism, despite its association with death and suffering, possesses profound educational value. When practiced responsibly, it serves as a powerful medium for historical learning, moral reflection, empathy building, and critical understanding of human society. Dark tourism embodies both ethical challenges and significant educational values. We had already discussed on that. While it risks commercialization, voyeurism, and reinforcement of global inequalities, it also offers powerful opportunities for historical learning, moral reflection, and empathy building. When approached responsibly, dark tourism can transform sites of suffering into spaces of remembrance, critical inquiry, and ethical awareness. Its true value lies in balancing respect for victims and communities with meaningful education. Guided by ethical regulation, sensitive interpretation, and responsible visitor behavior, dark tourism can contribute to a deeper understanding of the past and foster a more human and reflective global society. Thank you. Thank you very much.